Hong Kong Direct is your weekly racing wrap with news, views, previews, interviews, special guests as well. Coming up on the show today, well, Group 1 racing return, but we've got the second part of our Grant van Niekerk interview as well, focusing this week on his time here in Hong Kong. That's Grant with Ed Sadler very shortly, but Hong Kong's best are back, including Beauty Generation of E-, those famous pink blinkers though, when he lines up in the Stewards Cup, and he's beat the clock they want to beat in the sprints. Very warm welcome to the show. I'm Andy Lejeune, and please say I'm joined in the studio by Hong Kong Direct regular in Graham Cunningham. And Graham, these are the first Group 1 races since International Day, and we've got the two defending champs back. Yeah, some very familiar faces and some very intriguing questions. Beauty Generation's crown, it's not so much loose anymore, it's really wobbling. He's 3-1 down to Waikuku. By contrast, Beat the Clock has a very, very legitimate chance to stake a Horse of the Year claim. Dominant sprinter in 2019. Can he replicate that in 2020? This race last year was his first Group 1 win, and he's hardly put a foot wrong since. Absolutely. He swept all of Hong Kong's 3 1,200-metre Group 1s last season. He doesn't do it by very far, but he does it with super consistency and efficiency, and he's bound to be hard to beat again. We'll look at it all a little bit more closely in the second part of the show, but Beauty Generation won't be wearing the blinkers. They're just tinkering things slightly. Well, cheek pieces this weekend. Yeah, some cheek pieces, and they can make a real galvanising difference. The problem is they really need to, because we talked head-to-heads, 3-1 down against Waikuku now, and Waikuku is 5 and on the up. Beauty Generation is 7, and it looks, to the naked eye at least, like Father Time is nipping at his collar these days. All right, well, we'll look at all of that in the second part of the show. Before all of that, though, if you're watching last week, you'd have seen Ed and Grant talking about Grant's early days in South Africa. But as we pick the story up this week, Grant now focusing on his time here in Hong Kong.
My first few months in Hong Kong was tough. Mentally it was tough for me, being away from home and not being around my family members and of course my kids as well. So it was really tough for me, and I had to deal with a lot. But it's worth it. Hong Kong's a great place to ride, and it's a place that I want to do well and prove myself, because I am good enough. So I just have to keep doing what I'm doing.
You mentioned things were tough in those first few months for you. Now, what, 18 months on from then, is it easier?
It becomes a little bit easier. Look, it's always tough. Mentally, it becomes easier. You sort of get used to everything, and it's always tough trying to get on the good rides all the time. You got really good riders over here, and every race is different over here. It's really tricky. It's not always smooth sailing. You can have a great day, and the next meeting you can just you can find yourself with not much luck in the running, and get good wide or get suspended. I suppose if you just keep on racking up the winners over here, it does become easier. The trainers use you, the owners like you. I think the main thing is improving on horses here all the time. For newcomers like myself, if you keep improving on horses, eventually owners and trainers take note of that, and they want to start giving you more chances. Is
there a horse that stands out you feel that you've improved on and reaped the rewards because of that?
Yes, look, there's a few that I've improved on and eventually won with them. None of them like really stand out, but I've had some. For the short terms, yeah, some nice success. Obviously winning grade 2 and a grade 3.
Big Party, he's coming now. Big Party's now taken over from Big Time Baby. Then came behind those runners, Thanks Forever, Jolly Banner, but Big Party, he wins the Bohemia Sprint Trophy. Sticking with him is the hard part, though. That's the only thing. A horse like Big Party, he's a horse I've had the ride and lost the ride, and blessed enough to pick him up again to win the grade 3 the other day. So it's really tough.
You finished that season then with 31 wins, 9th in the jockey's title. How do you rate that season overall, that first season here?
For me, it was a good season. Of course, it was a huge learning curve for me, and I think there was a lot of positives I can take out that season, and of course it's playing a huge role into my second season over here, and you know I've learned from my mistakes, and it seems to be paying off. I think it's the longer I stay, the better I'll become. Hong Kong's all about well, you never stop learning in this game, and I'm just glad I'm learning something new every day in Hong Kong.
And at the time of recording this, you're on 20 wins for the current season. You mentioned that Group 2 win a couple of months ago with Seasons Bloom and a recent Group 3. Do you feel you're going better this season than last season?
Yeah, 100%. I feel more confident this season, and for me, confidence is a big key for me, because I am one of the jockeys that do thrive on confidence, and you know, I naturally ride on instinct, but once you're confident, it just becomes so much easier. I just have to keep it going.
Seasons Bloom, full of beauty, hits the lead from Ratton. Coming late is Seasons Bloom, and Wishful Thinker. Seasons Bloom goes boom!
One final question for you then. We've got two dominant jockeys here in Hong Kong, Joe Moreira, Zach Purton, but we've seen you've done better in your second season already than what you're doing in your first season. You're younger than both of those guys. Where would you like to be in, say, 3, 4, 5 years' time?
I would like to maintain or be in the top 5. Of course, as long as Jay and Zach's around, we'll be behind them. I think they are great riders, and of course, with the support they get, it's not easy to come close to them at this time. But it's not impossible. I'm pretty sure we can make it work with the chances we get. But the rest of the other jockeys in Hong Kong are also really good. You can't fault any of them. It all comes down to the support you get, and of course the ones that make the less mistakes. I said before that if you are confident on horses and if you get the chances, you do make less mistakes, and the results come naturally. I would like to be in the top 3, top 4 in the next 3 years or so, and just maintain that position. Hopefully one day I would be able to fight out for the championship. That would be my long-term goal.
There you go, Grant van Niekerk speaking with Ed. And I mean, he got there in the end saying he wants to be champion. I think everyone wants to be champion, but he's realistic in the sense that having a good season, having 2 good seasons, doesn't mean you're guaranteed a good season next year. You've got to keep working hard.
Yeah, it's progression for a guy like that. And at 28 years of age, Andrew, he's approaching prime time in his career. And he's a sturdy lad, I think, both physically and temperamentally. He's extremely competitive. Anyone who's played cricket with him can tell you that. And he's flying high now. 9 winners in the last 10 Hong Kong fixtures. Treble, high-profile treble on Boxing Night at Happy Valley. And he needs the one thing that all good young jockeys need anywhere. He needs the high-quality horse that puts his name in lights. And that'll come in time.
Yeah, well, we saw him there winning on Big Party. He touched on the fact he was riding him in his early days, and I spoke to him actually when he was riding him. He was very excited about the horse. Lost the ride, but it's come full circle now. He would have been a possibility of running in this Group 1 on the weekend. Yeah,
it's a shame. He's a notable absentee this weekend, but he'll get his chance. So will Grant. I think he was keeping expectations fairly measured there, but there's no question that he has the potential to be a top 3 jockey in Hong Kong within the next 3 or 4 years for sure.
Yeah, and no problems with his weight either. He's got 9 rides coming up on the weekend, and he does ride in the sprint and Thanks Forever, who would be a surprise if he were able to win, but brings good form coming in. What else jumps off the page there for you, Grant?
I think Stronger and Bellagio, especially Stronger. He's in a red-hot sprint race in race 9 against good quality stablemate Computer Patch, Duke Y, etc. Beauty Applause. But he was a good horse in Australia, trialled very well recently. Bellagio is a bit of a frustrating horse, and he can start very slowly, but he can come home strong.
Yeah, all right. That's Grant van Niekerk and his rides on the weekend, and also a great interview there with Ed as well. All right, part 2 coming up very shortly, and we'll be looking ahead to the 2 Group 1s on the weekend. And Beauty Generation, can he defend his crown? Can he be back to his best? The stable think he's pretty close to it. Welcome back to Hong Kong Direct, part 2 of the show. We're looking ahead to this weekend's Group 1 action. We've got 2 at the very highest level, and we're starting off with the Stewards Cup. This is a Group 1 over the 1,600 metres, finishing featuring even last year's winner in Beauty Generation, but he's been beaten on his last 3 starts. Rattan up in trip, he's been campaigns as sprinter. White Cuckoo didn't win on International Day, but in front of Beauty Generation, he was second to Admire Mars. Southern Legend, who won the Sarside Ladies Purse earlier in the season. Fiore was coming out of the Cup on International Day. He finished 4th last year's Derby winner. Citron Spirit was 6th in the mile behind Admire Mars. Kying Star, who's been a thorn in Beauty Generation's side as far as the making the running honours have been concerned in his last 3 or 4 starts. Has that been the difference, or one of them, Graham, do you think?
I can't believe it's been the sole difference. There's a really interesting quote from John Moore. The special one is diminished. He's not talking about Jose Mourinho. He's not the top horse he was. We put that down to the age factor. I suspect John is probably right. Does that mean Beauty Generation can't win another big one? Of course it doesn't. But it means he's up against it now, because having beaten White Cuckoo when they first met this season, he's now been beaten by White Cuckoo not once, not twice, but 3 times. And last time in the Longines Hong Kong Mile, there seemed no excuses. I thought, I'm sure many other people thought the same thing, Andrew. At the head of the straight, I thought he's going to let rip here. Brett Davis called the race. He said the champ looks light on his feet. All of a sudden, those feet look pretty heavy, and White Cuckoo, despite a wide draw and having to be dragged back, ran past him pretty readily for second.
Well, I was looking at the times for his run this year in the mile and last season. He ran an identical time. He demolished them in 2018. 1:33.52. They couldn't get near him. He's run the same time this year and run a well-beaten third. The difference is he was a second quicker for his first half mile. This time round he was a second quicker in the second part of it, so trying to quicken up. But it looked like he was breaking horses early on last season, and he hasn't been doing that this.
You've hit the nail on the head. As Americans say, it's not just time, it's how you run time. And he's running his race in a different fashion, whether it be beginning, middle or end. Of late, he hasn't been able to put in that murderous fraction that gets his rivals in deep trouble, and therefore he's vulnerable.
All right, and he will switch for the cheek pieces this weekend as well instead of the blinkers. So what of White Cuckoo? He was very good through the 4-year-old series last year. He's maybe a little bit unlucky in the Derby as well, but he's beaten Beauty Generation fair and square the last 2-3 starts. Yeah,
and his size is miling equivalent of beat the clock, if you will, in that his improvement has not been spectacular. It's been incremental, but he's super consistent, and he still seems to be getting that little bit better with each race. No question, his second in the Hong Kong Mile was his best performance, and that despite the wide draw and the slightly troubled trip.
And tactically speaking, Joe doesn't have too many worries. He just jumps out, drops in. It's a smallish field. He'll follow them and let him go in the straight.
Yeah, if you watch the final 400 metres of the December race, he ran past Beauty Generation pretty readily, and he was going away from him at the line. That was the worrying thing for Beauty Generation. That old fire wasn't there. The cheek pieces are really interesting, and I get that. I get it completely. I think it's well worth trying something on an older horse to try and fire him up again. And maybe in his work, Zach Purton seems to think there's been an extra bit of pep in his step recently, but the acid test is Sunday's race, and White Cuckoo is a formidable rival for Beauty Generation now.
So what of the rest of the fields? Rattan brings in a different angle, now coming back up in trip. We've got Fiore coming down in trip, and we've got Southern Legend as well, who's also coming down in trip. They tried him in the Vase on International Day.
Yeah, Fiore ties in very neatly with White Cuckoo from last year and beat him in the Hong Kong Derby. My question there would be, we know that White Cuckoo has really thrived this season. Fiore has held his own, perhaps more than held his own. But at a mile, White Cuckoo's specialist trip, it seems, I think he has to have the edge. Southern Legend, I've been disappointed with him, not once, but twice recently. Kying Star, likewise. I think Fiore will run a solid race, third, maybe second, and I think Rattan can pick up some pieces later on. I think he's going to be ridden cold, try to come late and maybe take on a couple of horses who've gone to war with the main contenders. I think Rattan could be the surprise package at a big price.
Yeah, he's actually got a very good course and distance record, not at this level, but Richard Gibson interestingly thought this was the weaker of the two. I'm not sure if he used that exact word, but they obviously had the choice of the sprint, and they've gone for this one. The other horse is Citron Spirit, who just seems to be in no man's land in terms of the ratings. He's as honest as the day is long, but maybe not quite good enough to win, but they'll pick up some prize money.
Well, he's a smashing horse, but he's had 40 races, and he's got pretty close to Beauty Generation twice. That tells us two things: that Citron Spirit's in really good form. It also tells us that Beauty Generation ain't the horse it used to be.
All right, so the heart, for me, I'm sure maybe for you as well, wants to say Beauty Generation, but what do the facts and figures tell us?
Well, you'd love to see John Moore beat his chest after a Beauty Generation win and say, right, let's roll to Dubai. But logic suggests to me that Father Time is undefeated and Waikuku, 2 years younger, should have the edge again.
All right, there you go, Waikuku in the mile. I tend to agree. I'd love to see Beauty Generation up off the canvas, but it does seem like Waikuku's got his number at the moment. So on to the second of the Group 1s, and that is the Centenary Sprint Cup, headed by Beat the Clock, last year's winner and champion on International Day as well. Hot King Prawn, also from the John Size Yard. He was super on International Day. Mr. Stunning. Well, he's also seems to be back to his best, 4th in the sprints back in December. Full of Beauty, another one from the Size stable, who possibly a little bit unlucky in the sprint. Wishful Think, who finished off very strongly International Day as well. DB Pin, another one for John Size. And thanks forever, John Moore, Grant van Niekerk in the saddle. Premiere is the scratching. He would have been a pace angle as well. I don't think Chasing said anything too dramatically, but Beat the Clock, we talk about his consistency, not just at this level, but all the way through his career so far. At the end of the day, he's got the highest rating, he's the best horse in the race.
Yeah, and he spent part of last year in Beauty Generation's shadow. Why wouldn't he? Beauty Generation was outstanding, and he was beaten by Beauty Generation over 1400, but over 1200 he did it not once, not twice, but 3 times, all of Hong Kong's top sprints. And in that December race, it seemed a perfectly clean race for Athero, for Hot King Prawn, for Full of Beauty, and all the rest. And although it wasn't flashy, it wasn't flamboyant, Beat the Clock just has this precision timing, if you'll pardon the pun, that puts him in the right place at the right time. Yeah,
there's no Athero this time round. He had a fever after International. He hasn't quite recovered yet, if you're wondering where he was. He got the better of Hot King Prawn there, but there's the possibility, with no Premiere now, that Hot King Prawn might be afforded a soft lead and could steal it from the front.
It's a very relevant point. The softer the lead he gets, the more dangerous he is. And remember, the margins at play here are super fine. Beat the Clock's 3 Group 1 wins have been by a neck, half a length and a neck. So you can't afford any little misstep. You can't afford to give one of your main rivals a tactical advantage. And Joe Moreira will have to be very aware of the danger Hot King Prawn presents if he gets a soft lead.
Yeah, and we shouldn't forget the fact that he was favourite for the sprint on International Day last year. So he's not just, he was obviously suffered with some injuries, but he's always been a class act.
Well, not many horses come back from colic surgery as good as they used to be. Very few come back better. It looks like Hot King Prawn has. He's got a formidable strike rate, I think 9 from 13, and that last performance was on a par, if not better than anything he's produced, so he's a live danger.
We talk about Beat the Clock's consistency, but Mr. Stunning's been setting the bar very high for a long time as well. Only from 26 starts, only 3 times he's been out of the top 4 and has mixed it with the very best over the last few years.
Yeah, he's been a tremendous horse. I think he's been second in this race in both.
Dead heated with Beat the Clock 2 years ago.
Yeah, the last 2 years. He needs to find a pound or 2 from somewhere. If you wanted to knock Mr. Stunning, and he's a very tough horse to knock, Andrew, he's only won 1 of his last 10 races, and that was the Hong Kong Sprint in 2018. Perhaps the most important stat is that he and Beat the Clock have such a long history together, and they beat each other for quite a while. Mr. Stunning had the edge for quite a while, but on the last 4 occasions he's come up against the champion sprinter Beat the Clock, he's come off second best.
All right, so what about the rest of the fields? Full of Beauty, still on his way up. DB Pin seems very consistent. He actually had the fastest closing section on International Day and came from a long way back. Thanks Forever might be a bit of a stretch for him, but the Wishful Thinkers and Full of Beauties of this world?
Yeah, Wishful Thinkers running really well, but overall he looks just a little behind a couple of the size stars. I think Full of Beauty is one to keep an eye on because he's only had a dozen runs or so. He still seems to be getting slightly better. The key question for Full of Beauty and DB Pin, can they just keep tabs on the leaders when the pace really quickens? The smaller field than in December might help both those horses in that regard.
Yeah, and Full of Beauty might still be, Beat the Clock could run to a new mark, but Full of Beauty is still capable of doing that. Just a 5-year-old, we don't know quite what level he'll get to yet.
Yeah, I think it sets up to be a very, very tight finish and perhaps slightly more tactical race than the one in December, which makes it a little hazy, but Beat the Clock tends to find a way nowadays in the big races he's the one to beat, and I think it remains so. Hooking prawn, soft lead, very dangerous, but I think Beat the Clock can do it again.
Getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but chance for some of these sprinters maybe to go overseas later in the season as well. Do you think they're the right type of horses to campaign internationally?
Well, one of the issues in this department is John Size has dominated Hong Kong sprints for the last 3 years, and John Size these days isn't a known traveller. Wishful Thinker went to Dubai last spring. He's a high quality horse. Athero is the one in that he's absent from this race.
Has the entry in Dubai, the Alquoise.
And enormous untapped potential still, so everyone's looking forward to seeing him back on track.
All right, but as far as this race is concerned, Graham, who comes out on top in the end?
The champion sprinter is champion sprinter for a reason. I don't think he'll do it in a flashy manner. I don't think you'll see him burst clear, but I think you might see Joe produce him at the perfect moment once again.
All right, and we're agreeing on this one as well. So there you go. Beat the Clock in the sprint, but give a lot of the others a decent chance as well. So this weekend, the Stewards Cup and the Centenary Sprint Cup back to Happy Valley on a Wednesday night, and then we've got the Classic Mile coming up. That's a week on Monday for the Chinese New Year meeting, and I know you've caught up with Francis Loy recently as well, so he's going to have a big day, isn't he, a week Monday?
And Vincent Ho. Vincent Ho says, I've got a great chance in the Classic Mile with Golden 60, and Francis says, yes, but I've got two, because I also have more than this, who is a highly progressive horse. So great to see a different training face in the frame for the big races, and Vincent Ho has been on Golden 60 right from the word go, and he's got so much to look forward to now.
All right, well, great to have him always. Graham, enjoy the action on the weekend.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to leave you this week with last year's Centenary Sprint Cup in actual fact, and Beat the Clock. This was a Group 1 breakthrough. Of course, he's added two more since then, and see if he can do it again on the weekend. That's the show. Thanks for watching. Enjoy this, and bring all the action again on Sunday from Hong Kong, direct to you.
At the 400, Little Giant clicks up. DV Pins right there. Beat the Clock. Mr. Stunning is placed under pressure, but as always, he starts to respond. Little Giant still has it. Beat the Clock. DV Pins weakening. Then Mr. Stunning. DV Pins running to Little Giant with 100 to go. Mr. Stunning's not done. It's Beat the Clock. Mr. Stunning. Beat the Clock. Mr. Stunning's cutting him back. Beat the Clock hanging on. It's his finest hour.